here it is, part 2, which is kind of going from the beginning where part 1 was a little bit in the middle. My coworker and I were going over this basic stuff, and I made a worksheet just like a good teacher. And so here it is, install basics. I just made kind of a list. I tried to put them in the order that you should do them. I won't necessarily be perfect, but I kind of just whipped it up so that he'd have something to go off of. He's not a beginner necessarily, but I'm the one with all the technical stuff. So the first item I put up there is workspace. You're gonna shave 20 minutes off of your overall install time. If your workspace is already lit, warm, it is swept before the vehicle comes in, you wash your hands so you don't get oil and crap all over the vinyl. Your table is clean, your tools are out and ready to use. You don't have to hunt around for your extension cord or your stool, blah, blah, blah. And then you bring in the vehicle. You walk around it, you create a visual game plan. This is easier when you know what you're looking at if you are an experienced installer, but basically that means what are the problems? How am I going to approach them? What is this weird curve I've never seen before? It doesn't have any exits near it. How am I going to deal with it with the vinyl? Am I going to tile on a body line? Am I going to have to make this creative with the way I piece the vinyl on, or whatever, right? Every vehicle is unique. You should take pictures of all sides of the vehicle and close-up pictures of any of the damage so that the customer can't come back and frick you because they said that you backed their car into a pole and it's a hearsay thing. Don't want that. Set timer. I say this because I can have focus issues personally. So I set a timer, or sometimes in some cases it's a video. And then when I start working, I know that there's a timer running and I don't screw around because I don't want to know how long it took me, like with phone breaks. I want to know how long it took me for real. So, and that's a little bit of me taking pride in my work, but it helps me to focus. And I don't know if anyone else does mental tricks like phase changes, but when I do a phase change, it helps me to move from, pre-work mode and move into work mode. Once I'm in work mode, I am really focusing and it's good. I try really hard, so I get my water bottle or my coffee, I set my music, I set my timer, I roll up my sleeves, I put on my wrap glove, and then I go. And that helps me. And then I take also semi-frequent breaks, and this is also a mental trick, but anyways. Hardware removal should happen first because there might be dirt behind it, so clean it after you take off things like badges, models, random stickers that are in your way, and I don't know how you do that, maybe fishing line or glue remover or both. Ask me about that if you're curious. Make sure you label it and set it aside somewhere. Your screws go with the door handle you took off. You don't want to lose those. That's a very bad time. If you can't find the stuff you want to put on later, you didn't save yourself any time in that case if you have to search all over for it. Cleaning's very important. Cleaner, the better. Clean it until the paper towel, you cleaned it once, you cleaned it twice, there's still dirt on the paper towel, you clean it 3 times. Once the paper towel comes away clean, that's when it is clean, not before. Wrap your squeegee and paper towel to squeegee out very narrow crevices and trim lines. The edges of doors, make sure there's no dirt in there, because if you tuck some vinyl in there and you get dirt on it, everything just got really hard. It says mask and knife list right after that because that's the stage you should do next. Masking your obstacles or your edges or like the headlight, anything you're going to trim near or around. Masking helps the vinyl to slide away from it easier so that it's not a struggle to tuck it in for a trim, and it's also a little bit preventative of you cutting the thing you're trimming against or beside, because there's another layer of protection. It's good for seeing what's underneath. You can see some of this. I wrote this down later in the video, but you can see if you put vinyl over, by mask of course I mean painter's tape, the green tape that I like to use, and I can see that line, and I have an easier time understanding. Sometimes you have to trim blind and you understand where to go. Mask is also good for peeling the extra vinyl, like if you're near headlight and you finish the trim, you peel the wrap off, and the wrap is not sticking and pulling and breaking on the headlight because it's a sticky surface for the wrap. It's coming off of the mask, which has a nice mattified surface, and then the mask comes off easy. Things get faster and faster the more that you use these little tricks. Maybe not at first when you're a beginner, but that's okay. Knifeless is referring to knifeless tape. You can, I think, get it from Avery Dennison. It's a wonder of a thing. There's certain areas it's very good to put in, such as the bottom of a truck box where you want a straight trim. You don't want to trim right on the vehicle because you're not confident, or it's easy to cut too deep because it's an awkward angle, or you don't want to get on the floor. There's lots of things it's useful for, but I'm not going to say them all now. The next one, it says mock up and measure out. Mock up is when you put all your panels that you printed out, and you have to, you could be for a paint wrap too, but it's most important for printed graphics. You line up all your panels where they need to about register to each other and go on the vehicle. Not exact pixel to pixel, obviously. I mean, you could, but chances are you're going to have to peel one back to apply one anyway, and then it's going to wiggle or something and not be exact. It says mock up because you're just mocking it into place, just preliminary. And this is because you need to know, oh, the place where I put this on the vehicle near the front, even though it appears right on the proof, actually goes 4 inches too far off the end, and I lost a letter in my graphic. That's a problem, and if I had started applying, the whole thing would be fricked. So make sure you measure it out and mock it up first. Obstacles are where they should be. They're not going to get in the way of a logo. Logos and text are most important in this way. You just do this double checking at the beginning before you put down a very expensive piece of vinyl, and you feel bad for the rest of the day and probably night. Sometimes I've stayed up thinking about it. Next one, choose anchor panel, point and type. So which panel do you want to anchor with? Is it going to be the middle one because it's easier to line up in each direction? Do you want to do the back because you want the tile lines that overlap in the middle to, you know, point towards the back so there's no wind resistance against the lip of the glue edge? Or do you want to start from the front because the swoop edge at the front, or the weird design thing that's going on, is easier to lay down without having to worry about lineup at the same time? It's kind of up to you. Once you choose your anchor panel, it's down, everything else will register to it. So just keep that in mind. The point at which you anchor in that panel and the type and direction of your anchor all matter. So I would start with direction. Is it going to be vertical? Are you going to peel the paper from the left side, and then when you fold or cut the paper, apply it from left to right and right to left, like an up and down? Or are you going to pull the paper from the top or bottom? From the top, if you ask me, you should always do from the top. And then you'll have a horizontal line to squeegee up and down from after the paper's out of your way. So usually horizontal one is good. And by that I mean you will be working up the vehicle and then working down with your squeegee. You won't be working side to side. Because vehicles are made this way, you usually have body lines that run horizontally, and you want to go over those body lines in sort of a feeding motion with your squeegee over it, like you're going over a jump. You don't normally want to work against that in a perpendicular way. You want to make sure you choose a smart anchor latitude/longitude. The type of anchor and the point of it. So the point at which you start, you want it to be the top edge. Do you want it to be the middle? Do you want it to be just below your big old recess that's going to get in your way? Do you want it to be just above the door handle? Because you want to start where you know the text will land where it's supposed to. You know, all these things feed in. Let's say there's a text line just above the door handle and you start below the door handle. You can still tent and work around the door handle as usual, but maybe that extra stretch will make the text line a little wonky, or maybe it'll make it land a little higher than you planned for it to, because there's unpredictable things about working with obstacles that might happen to the more hard or concrete, I should say, aspects about the design. It's not as much of an issue when you're working with a paint wrap, because you're turning a yellow car green and the green looks green no matter what you do. So you kind of have to decide for yourself what is easiest, and you might need help. This takes a bit of experience, because something you didn't see on this wrap comes up as a problem later, or you don't have that foresight. That's fine. The type of anchor is kind of for odd. That consideration is for odd circumstances. So in particular, when I'm putting vinyl up on a window, if I'm wrapping, covering a window with vinyl, and there's a big window frame on all sides and it's an inch deep, so the window is recessed by an inch. And so the edges of my vinyl curling up on the sides, the bleed, which you kind of always want to bleed, but if it's curling up on the sides and causing issues and making it hard to line it up and anchor it, I would maybe use something called a half moon anchor, which is you go to the edge, it's kind of a temporary as opposed to permanent anchor, and you tear away the backing in sort of a half moon shape so that the half moon goes onto the window, so that you have some vinyl exposed that you can lay down on the window temporarily and anchor it for the purposes of it not moving from where you want it to be, because you want that window graphic to end up looking straight. So it needs to stay in one place while you're working with it. You can't just move around while you're trying to get it on there. That's a pain. Other circumstances are like, I can't start with a tension line because there's some weird stuff on the surface like rivets, so I'm going to tape it with that green painter's tape again, across in a straight line, so as though it were just a straight up peeled my paper back and applied that line anchor of your actual vinyl panel. Maybe you'll do a green tape in that same line. In that case, which is fine, always do at least 2 green tape stripes. Trust me on this one. It's gonna be so much better, because I've had so many things fall off when I just finished measuring them out and I have to start over. It's the worst. So let's see. Hinge, edge tape. I think I covered that. Yeah, your axis, that's what I meant by the latitude or longitude. And yeah, it depends on your body lines, obstacles, your graphics, your texts, blah, blah. Next one is to see the panel and signs. This is more of a tip for your overall wrap game. For instance, the bumper, the front bumper of, I don't know, a Civic. It's a pretty simple bumper, but you don't deal with it all at once. At least you don't have to, especially if you're alone and you have only a 4-foot wingspan like me, because I have small arms. Instead, I will split up into signs. The left corner and the right corner are technically separate signs on that bumper, because I don't have to deal with it with one and have it affect the other side. In fact, I can hinge it down the center, up and down in this case, and work to the left, and whatever I do on the left corner, it's not going to affect the right in the least, because there's a hinge in the middle. It kind of splits it up. That nice flattish area in the middle of the front bumper, you just you just lay that down, and then you work with the left, and then you peel the paper on the right when you're ready, and then you lay the right down. It's not going to pull or bother the left side. So that's nice. See the panel and signs. Things that break up your signs are like severe body lines or recesses, obstacles, trim heavy areas. Maybe your window has many rubber things and trims and a bug shield on it, and so you try to separate that from the rest of your application area in order to work with them separately and don't multiply your problems together, kind of minus them from each other. It's a hard thing to just explain. It's better to show, but I did show some of it in the part 1 video. Start panels that line up to each other in the same latitude to account for the same stretch factor. Okay, so this is the same thing as when you're doing 2 pieces of die bond or flat signage, and they have to line up to each other. Let's say there's a giant crown on the sign that stretches from the left to the right, and the 2 pieces of vinyl that you are lining up with the crown cut down the center are going on flat signs, and you start the first sign in the middle, and you squeegee up and you squeegee down, and it's done. You want to start the second one in the middle too, because anything you squeegee into vinyl is going to stretch it. If you start 2 feet higher, then when you squeegee down, you're actually going to have a slightly different stretch in it, and you might actually see those lines not quite meet up wherever the crown needs to meet up in the middle, wherever the graphic, you can see the pixels are off now. So try to, especially like multiple panels, for consistency, of course, you do the same things, you get the same results, consistency. You want to start roughly, at least as much as you can, unless there's major problems like obstacles that make it impossible, which you would kind of work into your game plan in the first place, to try and work that consistency throughout your game. Try to start them on the same latitude, which means just up and down. I started this one a foot from the top. I'm going to start the other one a foot from the top. When I squeegee up, it'll be the same stretch from the same point, and I squeegee down. By the time we get to the bottom, we should see those things somewhat lining up by the end, hopefully. Set up for glass obstacles and use your triangles. Triangles should be circled in red. I haven't learned how to do that in a video yet. I'm not going to today, but triangles are important. It's like when you make the bed and you pull all of the bed sheet down center of the bed and you have all these vertical wrinkles. When you go to the other side and you pull in what we call a triangle, which is just pulling from the perpendicular side of that wrinkle, of that line, it pulls the wrinkle out, because now you've kind of have this triangle shape, but you're pulling on the vinyl so that all those wrinkles come out where they belong. And that's called creating glass. As much as you can when you're setting up your vinyl in the first place, especially if you don't work the vinyl while you're pulling the paper. If you pull all the paper at once, if you want to be fast, then you pull glass and you tack it near the edges as much as it allows. Of course, touching the glue itself as little as possible with clean hands also, or wrap glove. Wrap gloves are really useful. I recommend them. You should get a nice glassy surface of the vinyl. It's not applied. It's not flat onto the, it's not really ready to go, but it looks kind of finished. It looks how it should look. It looks glassy and not wrinkly and not with waves, right? It's like a calm lake. If it looks like a calm lake, it's way more ready to squeegee than if there's ripples in it. So that's what you're going for. And your obstacles are going to get in the way, but yeah, the same thing applies if you're going to stretch over an obstacle to tent over it. For instance, tenting is when you try to make it look nice and glassy in every direction, and then when you touch it kind of in a circle around that obstacle, you should have kind of a glassy surface, no wrinkles, nothing kind of bunching up and making it impossible to squeegee it down flat. You want it to be flat in the end. Wrinkles are a no and glass is a go, blah, blah. Is material directional? that is just a question you ask yourself for specialty materials. So if I'm putting like a silver metallic on the vehicle, I have two pieces, one for the front door and one for the back door, and they line up in the middle, and you put one upside down to the other. You don't think it should matter, but silver metallic might have a special flake or luster in it, and you stand back and it looks slightly different. And it's always going to look slightly different no matter what light it's in, because that material is directional, which means it should all be applied in the same direction it came off the roll. Usually the backing will show you that, like if there's a stamp or an arrow pointing on the back. And if there isn't, you should draw it on, because then you can't get it all mixed up and then not notice until it's on. That's a bad time. So the next section is squeegee. It's possible that I covered all of this with my coworker. I believe I did. So if you watch the other video, you'll hear me rattling this stuff off of my little clipboard. So I'll move on to the next section. I also covered some of this with a coworker guy. I don't know if he wants me to tell you his name, so I won't. But we've been working together for a few years now. It says practice on a non-vehicle surface. Yes, cutting on a vehicle is no small matter. By the way, sorry if I always talk in a weird monotone voice. It might be very boring. You know what? Put me on to help you sleep. Maybe that. So you cannot cut vinyl on a vehicle when your point is touching the body of the vehicle unless you are confident, very confident, that you will not cut too deep through the vinyl. You have to know that when you put the point of your blade on a vehicle, that you will cut through the vinyl and only the vinyl. And if you have a fresh blade, which is down here in caps, fresh blade, you have snapped your blade. If you use an X-Acto blade like I do, the little ones, 9mm, then you need a very light touch, and you need to know that you are only cutting through the vinyl and no farther. So, how do you know this? It's a matter of practice. It's about feel. For me, you can practice by cutting through the vinyl on another surface first. Here's what I recommend. Put a piece of vinyl, apply flat on a window. You're not going to hurt a window with your X-Acto knife if it's not a 30 degree and you don't press super duper hard. Put another piece of vinyl on the first piece and also squeegee it out flat. So they're both applied flat. There's glass underneath. You're not going to hurt it. Take your 9mm, snap it clean, always fresh, and cut what you think is the appropriate depth through the first layer of vinyl so that you think you are only cutting through the top layer. Peel off the top layer and make sure you've cut all the way through it. You did not leave any glue, or you didn't just cut through the laminate so that the vinyl itself is still like attached and stretching and it's not cut. And then take off the second layer of vinyl and pull it. And make sure that you don't have a line breaking in the middle, which means you scored the lower layer. You want it to be perfectly intact, and you look at it in the light, in the reflection of the light, and you don't see a score line in the laminate either from the tip of your blade. That means that you only cut through the first layer, all the way through the first layer, but you didn't score or cut through the bottom layer. It is not as hard as it sounds. It is perfectly possible, but you should not be cutting on a vehicle before you practice this, unless you have the experience or whatever. I know I'm not just talking to 100% beginners, but this is very important. You will get an angry, very angry customer if they found out you cut their paint and it rusted or whatever. Repainting vehicles is very expensive. You don't want that. You instead want to practice vinyl on vinyl cutting on a window 80 times if you have to. That's what you want. That's a good day versus the bad day scenario where you accidentally cut the paint. So trust me, it is possible. You just have to practice. and yeah, watch my my trim section in the video. That's pretty good. I didn't show any cutting on the vehicle. I showed the blade skating alongside the painted body, and how to do that safely also needs practice. Also should not be doing on a vehicle the first time. But cutting on the vehicle is sometimes necessary. A lot of the trim technique actually is engineered to avoid having to do that. And so it is already being done as little as possible. But when it is necessary, you want to know that you can just cut a line and then peel off the excess, and there's no cut in the paint. That's what you want. Tape off obstacles. Oh yes, so I did explain this in full earlier. I explained this in the video: tuck, pop, and tuck before you cut. And I didn't write it down, but after that, you have to seal it with a squeegee or a finger. Make sure it is tuck, pop, tuck, trim / cut, and then seal. Sealing the deal is important. You will never succeed if you don't seal. I'll put it on a t-shirt. Practice with different materials and thicknesses. Okay, so the way that you trim chrome is going to be very different from the way you trim metallic and wrap and calendar and cut vinyl and you name it. You have to make a habit, please, especially if you are a little new at this. Make a habit of putting a scrap of that vinyl on a surface that is somewhat flush, and practice trimming. Make sure your depth control on the pressure of your blade is very well practiced and well felt, and eventually you will get so good at it that you won't really think about it that much anymore. It sounds a little crazy if you're intimidated by this, but I remember thinking, you know, this is impossible, and then finding out that it wasn't. So a few more tips for you. Heating. If you are post heating, you use a laser thermometer, it's kind of a wrap must. It's a good tool to have, especially since overheating can screw up your vinyl permanently. You hold it at close range with your laser in the spot that you're heating, and it should be 92 degrees, no more. Or that is the point at which it becomes post-heated. That means that the memory, attribute of the vinyl, which when you stretch vinyl and then you heat it and it relaxes all back into its original form, that's called memory. It's going back to its original shape. So you can take out stretch and it'll kind of shrink back. When you post heat it, you're heating it to such a degree that kind of kills the memory, which means it's kind of stuck on to the body now. It's not going to change shape anymore. It's not going to shrink back. It's so much less likely to pop out of a recess or peel back from an edge. Post heating is a very important stage. You can't neglect it. This is not optional. You must post heat. You must learn how. It says practice with scraps until you can see or smell it overheat. Okay, so yeah, take a piece of garbage vinyl, stick it to a table or stretch it between 2 points, table legs or something, and heat it up so much that you can see it or smell it overheat. It will sometimes actually brown, and so it is burning and melting, or you can smell it. It starts to smell different and burnt. That just gives you an idea of when you've overheated it. That's important too, because everyone's heat gun is different. So if you get a Canadian Tire, I don't know, $30 heat gun as opposed to a $100 heat gun, probably it's not going to overheat as fast. Or maybe it will. It's really good to know for sure. So just take some garbage and stretch it out really far. This is also fun. So just heat it up and watch it shrink back. That's all fun. And then make sure you know what a vinyl starts to look like and you have a feel for how long this takes. It's true it overheats slower when it's attached to a vehicle because the body of that vehicle is absorbing the heat. So the vinyl itself isn't just taking all the heat. But still, it's good to know. It's good to know how it looks and smells and feels. Removal heating. You should heat up vinyl to remove it usually. I would say 89% of the time when you're removing or stripping vinyl. Heating it up helps the glue to let go. And then you're not breaking it and you start it again. And then you have to do this again and that's just a giant waste of time. Move your heat gun in circles or short swoops back and forth. Don't just train it in one spot and then get confused as to why the plastic on the guy's fender melted. Touch it often with like short taps. Don't burn yourself. And don't, for the love of everything that is holy, touch the tip of the heat gun, because I know that you know this, but it hurts like a mother bleeper and you don't want that. You just don't. Yeah, don't ever heat and then push or squeegee right on the hot vinyl. It says for the recess. That's a technique that some people misuse. They heat up something that there's not enough vinyl to go into a recess, so they heat it up and it stretches into that recess. Yeah, don't do that. Application. Always seal after you are done cutting. Always, always, always. Do it twice. Do it twice just to be safe. Always cut with a bleed when you're going around obstacles. Okay, so you're almost doing your preliminary cut. You're going around a door handle. Cut it with a short like border that you know is going to reach and surpass the edge of the area you need it to reach. Because when you tuck it in nicely, and this goes into the the tuck pop tuck technique. When you tuck it in, sometimes you'll find out, oh, I just cut just barely enough, and I thought I was cutting a bleed. Well, it's a good thing I didn't cut less, because then I'd be all shortcut and I'd kind of be forked, because you can't put the vinyl back on once you cut it. It's kind of done. Yeah, cut yourself a bleed, and then once it's nice and close and tucked in, you'll see exactly where you need to cut, and you'll often have a nice straight line and tucked vinyl edge, and then you can cut it very accurately. There's no shortcuts, and everything's happy. Cold stretch your corners first. This is easier to show. It is a tip that I picked up from a course I took. It's to avoid taking vinyl and overstretching the corner, like the corner of a hood or panel, and then it lifting, because when you stretch something hot, a lot of the time you're overstretching that glue, and the glue is not enough glue now, so now it's going to lift because it's not going to stay down. So cold stretching helps to avoid that. So you take your vinyl kind of up and over the corner in a hooking motion on like your hood corner, the pointy one. So the corners first, squeegee away from them along the edges, and then you trim, and then you seal, and then you post heat. And post heating helps that glue, which is on that corner, to stop its memory tendencies and to grab on. And post heating is very important. Again, I can't stress it enough. You cannot skip post heating. Okay, the stuff in the middle of that worksheet, I'm not going to get to it today. It's kind of special technique stuff. It's easier to show, and it's mostly for the purposes of me helping my coworkers to be more advanced. Maybe I'll go over it another time if I have a chance to show it on the camera. It's a lot easier to show. But I wanted you to have these almost as like your own worksheets. That's why this video is all text, so you can just keep it. So finishing, I have these as tips. I'll go over them really quickly. This makes your wrap faster, better, and more professional. Replace your badges. Make sure if you want to put them back. Most people don't care if your 1500 power stroke badge goes back on the door. So sometimes I'll just stick them in the console, but you stick them back on, or you stick back on all of your hardware like fender liners and door handles, antennae, and you make sure everything's screwed in and replaced properly, all the stuff you labeled nicely at first so that you can find it all. Then you take a small break. you've been going at this wrap all day, or for 3 days, or for a week, and you just go and you smoke, or don't if smoking's bad for you, but go outside and clear your head and have a snack, take some coffee, talk to somebody, whatever it is that helps you to get out of your space in your head where you don't realize you are usually. You're in rat brain and you've been doing this for hours and hours and you're eager to get it done and you're eager to get it out. You just take a 2 or 5 minute break, and then you're not so rushy and you're not going to overlook things, and you'll come back with fresh eyes. And then you do your 5-minute once over. You make sure all your edges are sealed. Check over your obstacles. Oh, I forgot to tuck that edge around the back of this obstacle because I got distracted by this issue. Good thing I didn't forget about that. That's happened to me lots and lots. So check all of your edges, your obstacles. Go into your head and think, have I remembered to post heat everything that was over a 30%, 10 to 30% stretch factor, which might be hard to visualize, but I can, I can cover that in another video. Check your text because the dot at the end of the phone number fell off and on the text or the mask and you didn't notice. Magnets all the time. I just about leave my magnets on the vehicle, and the driver will just drive away with it, and there goes my magnets. I'll never see them again. Always check all of the vehicle. Check the tires once you roll it out of the shop, since you rolled it over top of a bunch of garbage probably. Make sure all your tapes and tags and scraps are pulled off of the vehicle. You can polish the surface of the vinyl if you want it all to be fingerprint free and to look even nicer. The tires won't have any wads of tape or mask on them if you pull them off before the customer sees. Yes, post heat and sealer. Sealer is a particular product, like a glue, that goes around edges that are particularly vulnerable. So wheel wells, the edges of doors where people grab the door a lot and brush up against the vinyl, and they'll pull it and scrape it and ding it over time. The trunk of the car, where somebody will put stuff into the trunk all the time, and that edge needs to have a little extra encouragement. Sealer is really good. I'd never miss sealer. I do live in a pretty climate like heavy area, lots of salt on the road, lots of precipitation, lots of big trucks, rock, gravel, you name it. I live in a rough place for wraps. So I'm very good to the wheel wells, and especially the front end. If I put anything on the front end, it's not very often I do. Take your photos when it's in the sun. It looks great. Put it outside the shop. Make sure you get your shop in the background. You look really great. You put it on Facebook. Your boss loves you. Take some video panorama for your YouTube video that I'm editing right now. And then some extra tips at the bottom. I said this in the video, but give color scraps or extra decals, text decals. Let's say you cut some extras because you're tired of recutting. Give them to the customer. They will love you if a letter happens to fall off because you just missed that tiny patch and there was a little bit of glue remover and it wasn't quite clean, or something happened, it fell off. The customer has an extra letter. It's just a really nice gesture. Yeah, and then I have this for myself. Fill out my times. I always have a timer going, so this helps. I fill out my paperwork. I get the customer to look at it and say what they think. This is really helpful when you're on the job and you put decals on a vehicle in a shop somewhere 20 minutes away from your work, and you leave and the customer calls your shop right away and says, well, you missed something, or I don't like it, or whatever. That's a pain, and it makes you look very unprofessional if you have to go back out and your boss doesn't like you and the customer doesn't like you, everybody doesn't like you. It's a bad day. So just while you're there, it's usually a good time to bring the customer over and say, hey, I'm finishing up, I'm taking off, what do you think? Is there anything else I can do for you? It's a really good moment when the customer says, awesome, I love it, I'll pass it on to my boss, and then you're in the clear because they said they liked it. And that means if they call your shop later, you can say to your boss, oh, that's so weird. because they said it was fine when they looked at it. And there's no way for them to refute that because they were there and you were there and your boss is just going to be a little bit easier on you. I love to do that. I love it. And that's also how people know you're leaving their shop and they know who's coming in and out of their shop. It's good. It's professional. And yeah, so if you're pulling something out of your shop, you also return the keys. Put a product care mirror tag on their mirror. That's just a way of saying don't put it through a power wash today. Don't whatever is on your product care tag. There's a lot of things that you can kind of send the customer away feeling like they've had better customer care. I like to put a keychain on their keys because it helps us to promote ourselves. But yeah. So just a little more. I got you some progress pictures at problem area. The wheel well was a bit of a mistake. You can see I have a gap in my vinyl there. I actually chose to cut it off as straight as possible and reline it up all by hand because I was just not satisfied with that black gap. And then I put together some progress pictures. There is the matter of the door handle, which I didn't finish in either video, and I figured this one's a little too long, so I'm going to do that in a third video. I mean, that footage, I'll show it up and maybe, I don't know, help you understand it. And then, yeah, that will be the 3-parter. And then you'll be able to see the finished product. Okay, thanks for watching.